The first time I realized I didn't belong at that gala wasn't when I saw the price of the champagne. It was when a man I'd never met adjusted my cufflink without asking, smiled like he owned the room, and said, "Relax. You're just here for tonight." He said it kindly, like a favor, and that's when I understood this wasn't my evening. It was a performance, and I was a prop. Before we go any further, if stories about quiet power, public humiliation served cold, and people revealing who they really are interest you, subscribe to the channel, hit like, and leave a comment. I read them all. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Michael Carter. I'm 58 years old. I've been married to Laura Carter for 26 years. Or at least, that's what the paperwork says. The invitation came embossed, heavy, expensive. A closed corporate gala for Halcyon Dynamics, the kind of company that doesn't advertise because it doesn't have to. Laura worked there. Senior management. Or close enough to taste it. She told me attendance was expected. That was her word. Expected. Like taxes. Like gravity. The venue was a restored opera house in downtown Chicago. Marble floors, gold leaf ceilings, lighting designed to make everyone look slightly more important than they really were. Men in tailored suits that whispered money. Women in dresses that suggested control. Everyone speaking softly, as if loud voices were for people without leverage. Laura walked 3 steps ahead of me the moment we entered. Not enough to be rude. Just enough to send a message. She didn't take my arm. She didn't look back. Her boss, Richard Lawson, found us within minutes. Tall, silver hair. That relaxed confidence men get when consequences rarely land on them. "Laura," he said, holding her hand a second too long. "You look radiant." Then his eyes shifted to me, scanning, assessing, dismissing. "And you must be?" She smiled. A professional smile. "This is my husband." That was it. No named, no history, no weight. "Husband," Richard repeated, nodding, like he'd just learned a job title that wouldn't last long. That we moved through the room. Laura laughed at things that weren't funny, touched Richard's arm when she spoke, leaned in close, her voice low. Familiar. Comfortable. Too comfortable that I stood there holding a glass I didn't want, watching a version of my wife I didn't recognize, but somehow knew. The kind of woman who knew exactly how much to laugh and when to stop. The kind who understood hierarchy the way sailors understand tides. People spoke to me politely. Briefly. Their eyes slid past me toward Richard every time. I was an accessory. A jacket someone forgot to hang up at one point. A man named Thomas Reed, a board member, I later learned, clapped me on the back and said, "Good of you to support her career." Support, like a folding chair. Laura didn't notice. Or she did, and chose not to. As the evening unfolded, I began to see patterns. Whispers that stopped when Richard passed. Looks exchanged. Jokes that landed with practiced ease. This wasn't just a party. It was a marketplace. And loyalty was currency. I excused myself and went to the bar, mostly to breathe. The bartender asked if I was enjoying the night. I said it was educational. That's when Richard appeared beside me, uninvited, swirling amber liquid in his glass like he was measuring time itself. He leaned in, not to whisper, but to speak just loudly enough. "Don't worry, man," he said, smiling for the room. "Around here, husbands come and go. Careers stay." There was laughter. Soft. Complicit. Laura stood a few feet away. She heard him. She said nothing. I looked at my reflection in the mirrored shelves behind the bar. Older. Calmer than I felt. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just smiled back and said, "Then you won't mind finishing what you started." The room didn't go quiet. Not yet. But something shifted. When I said it, I didn't raise my voice. That was the part people noticed later. Men like Richard are used to noise. Anger, protests, scenes. Calm unsettles them. Calm makes people lean in. He turned toward me, still smiling. But the smile had stiffened, like a door meeting resistance. "Finishing what I started," he said, chuckling. "Careful, Michael. This isn't a courtroom." I nodded. "Exactly. That's why I thought we could keep it light. I lifted my glass slightly, the way people do before a toast. Just a few questions. For fun. Thomas Reed paused mid-laugh nearby. A woman in a black gown stopped pretending to check her phone. Laura's eyes flicked toward me for the first time all evening. Not with concern, but calculation. Richard gestured with his drink. Go on then. Sure, I said easily. I was just curious. When you and my wife were texting after midnight last Thursday, was that about the Zurich trip or the Denver one? A ripple went through the circle around us. Not shock. Interest. That dangerous kind. Richard blinked once. I text a lot of people. Of course, I said. That's leadership. I only asked because Laura told me Zurich was confidential and Denver hadn't been approved yet. I assumed there must have been a third reason. Laura inhaled sharply. She still didn't speak. Richard laughed again, louder this time. You misunderstand how executives communicate. Probably, I agreed. I work with contracts. Words matter to me. Like when someone promises to fast-track a promotion if certain expectations are met. That phrase stuck with me. Someone near the bar murmured, "Did he just say fast-track?" Richard's jaw tightened. Are you accusing me of something? I shook my head. No accusation. Just curiosity. For instance, those service trips you and Laura took. Boston, Seattle, Napa. Funny thing is, she told me HR logged them as single occupancy travel. I wondered if that was a clerical shortcut or a policy I wasn't aware of. Now the room was paying attention. Not in a dramatic way. In a surgical one. People tilted their heads. Filed details away. Careers are built on that skill. Richard glanced around, realizing, too late, that every word now had witnesses. This is inappropriate. That's what I thought, I said, which is why I'm surprised you were comfortable making jokes about marriage. I assumed standards applied evenly. Laura stepped forward then. Michael, stop. Her voice wasn't angry. It was frightened, and that told me more than any confession could have. Richard raised his hand, trying to regain command. This conversation is over. Of course, I said. One last thing, though. When Laura mentioned you'd personally ensured her performance reviews bypassed the usual committee, I wondered, was that standard procedure or another courtesy extended to trusted colleagues? Silence. Not the awkward kind. The deliberate kind. Thomas cleared his throat. A man I didn't know set his glass down untouched. Someone else quietly walked away. Already rehearsing how they'd retell this, Richard's face had gone pale beneath the tan. You're embarrassing your wife, he said that I looked at Laura. She wouldn't meet my eyes. No, I replied softly. I'm letting the room decide what's embarrassing. I finished my drink and placed the glass on the bar. My hands were steady. That surprised me. What didn't surprise me was how quickly power drains when it's exposed to daylight. Behind me, conversations restarted, but differently. Quieter. Sharper. People weren't laughing now. They were thinking. Laura whispered my name like a warning. I turned toward her, finally. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, wrapped in silk and ambition, suddenly unsure which one would protect her. I didn't plan this, she said under her breath. I know, I answered. And that was the most honest exchange we'd had all night. The strange thing about silence is how loud it becomes once people start assigning meaning to it. After my last question, no one rushed in to rescue Richard. No jokes. No clinking glasses to reset the mood. Just a thin, brittle pause where everyone pretended to check watches they didn't need. Richard straightened his jacket like it could restore order. Excuse me, he said, his voice clipped now managerial. He stepped away from the bar, nodding to a few people as if the moment were already behind him. But moments like that don't move on. They stick. They follow. Laura grabbed my arm, not hard, but with intent, and guided me toward a quieter corridor near the balcony. Her nails pressed through the fabric of my sleeve. What are you doing? She hissed, and I looked at her hand first, then at her face. Standing where you left me. I said. You had no right, she said. This wasn't the place. I let out a short breath. Funny. He seemed comfortable choosing the place. She glanced back toward the ballroom, where people had begun rearranging themselves, forming new clusters. Richard was already surrounded by two men I didn't recognize. Their faces were polite. Their eyes were not. "You don't understand how this works," Laura said. "You humiliated him." "No," I said quietly. "I let him speak." "That's different." She shook her head, pacing once, then stopping. "You think this ends tonight? You think people forget?" "I think people remember exactly what they need to," I replied. For a moment, she looked at me the way she used to during arguments years ago, when the goal wasn't winning, but surviving the conversation. Then her phone vibrated. She checked it too quickly. Her mouth tightened. "Who?" I asked. She didn't answer. She slipped the phone back into her clutch. "We should leave." "Now?" I asked. "The night's still young." Her eyes flashed. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Pretend this is some clever stand," she snapped. "You've put me in an impossible position." I thought about that. About how impossible positions are often carefully constructed over time, brick by brick, until someone notices they're trapped. "You've been standing in that position for a while," I said. I just walked into the frame. We returned to the room together, but not as a pair. She drifted ahead again, instinctively, gravitating toward people who mattered. I followed at a distance that felt deliberate now. The energy had changed. People spoke to me longer, asked neutral questions that weren't neutral at all. A woman named Susan Miller touched my arm and said, "That must be complicated," like she was offering sympathy and gathering data at the same time. Richard avoided me. Not dramatically, strategically. Every time our paths might have crossed, he veered away, engaged someone else, laughed too loudly. Control through motion. I found a seat near the back, watching the room the way you watch weather roll in, unable to stop it, but alert to shifts. Laura stood near the stage now, speaking to Daniel Brooks, someone I recognized from previous dinners. She nodded, serious, professional. No laughter, no touch. At one point, Thomas Reed approached me again. He didn't clap my back this time. He sat beside me, folding his hands. "You ask interesting questions," he said. "I like clear answers." I replied. He smiled thinly. "So do we." That was all he said. Then he stood and walked away, leaving behind the kind of sentence that echoes longer than a speech. The gala continued. Awards were announced. Applause rose and fell. On the surface, nothing had changed. Underneath, everything had. When Laura finally came back to me, it was close to midnight. Her face was composed, but her eyes were restless. "We're going home," she said. Not a suggestion. On the drive, the city lights streaked past the windows like unfinished thoughts. Neither of us spoke. Her phone buzzed twice. She ignored a red light. She finally said, "I didn't think he'd say it out loud." I kept my eyes on the road. "He didn't," I said. "You did, when you let him." The light turned green. I drove on. Monday mornings have a way of stripping away illusions. The tuxedo goes back in its garment bag. The champagne breath fades. What's left is structure, policy, and people deciding how much distance they need from a fire they didn't start. Laura didn't go to work that morning. She said she had a headache. I didn't challenge it. We moved around the house like strangers sharing a waiting room, careful not to collide, careful not to speak too soon. Around 10, her phone rang. She stepped into the kitchen and closed the door. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Walls don't stop tone. They only soften words. "Yes. I understand. Of course I'll cooperate." A pause. "No. I wasn't aware it would escalate." Escalate. A word people use when consequences show up without an invitation. She came out pale, her confidence folded inward. "They're opening a review," she said. "Internal. Compliance." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "That's thorough of them." She stared at me. "You sound pleased." "I sound awake," I said. "There's a difference." She sat across from me, hands wrapped tightly around her mug. "Richard says this is being blown out of proportion." "Richard would." I replied. She flinched at his name. He says someone misinterpreted things. That optics are unfortunate. Optics don't request late-night messages, I said. People do. Her jaw tightened. You think you're immune to this? I met her eyes. No. I think I'm finally part of the conversation. The day stretched. Afternoon light crept across the living room floor. Laura took another call. Then another. Each one shaved something off her. Certainty. Posture. The way she'd once spoken like outcomes were negotiable. By evening, she was pacing. They asked about the trips, she said. Who booked them? Who approved exceptions? And I asked, and Richard says he'll handle it. That was when I laughed. Not loudly. Just once. She stopped pacing. What? He already did, I said. Just not the way you hoped. She sank into the chair, covering her face with her hands. For the first time in years, she looked her age. Maybe older. I didn't think it would go this far. It always does, I said gently. It just takes time. That night, she didn't sleep. Neither did I. Somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning, she sat up and said, if this costs me everything, I waited. Was it worth it? She asked, and I thought about the gala. The laughter that had stopped mid-breath. The way people recalibrated in real time. It wasn't about worth, I said. It was about truth entering the room. She turned away. Tuesday brought emails. Formal language. Requests for availability. Richard's name appeared less frequently now, replaced by departments and titles. Systems don't get emotional. They just move. Laura dressed carefully that morning, choosing neutral colors, minimal jewelry. Armor disguised as professionalism. Before leaving, she paused at the door. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know, I replied. She nodded, as if that answered something, and left that I spent the day doing ordinary things. Laundry, paperwork, a walk around the block. Neighbors waved. Life continued. That's the part people forget. Consequences don't stop the world. They just change your place in it. When Laura came home, she didn't speak right away. She put her bag down slowly. Saturday. Looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time in years. They're interviewing others, she said. Not just me. I leaned back. Rooms remember, I said. So do people. She swallowed. Richard didn't look confident. I said nothing. That night, we ate dinner quietly. No arguments. No apologies. Just the sound of forks and the low hum of a house adjusting to new gravity. Outside, the lights stayed on late across the street. Somewhere, someone was writing a report. Somewhere else, someone was realizing power isn't permanent. It's borrowed, and borrowed things can be reclaimed. By Friday, the house felt different. Not tense, clear, like fog had burned off and revealed damage that had always been there. Laura came home early that afternoon. No calls, no pacing, just quiet, deliberate movements, as if every step mattered now. They put him on leave. She said finally. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. Administrative, she added. Pending findings. I nodded once. Not satisfaction. Resolution. She sat across from me at the table where we'd eaten 1,000 ordinary meals. They asked if I felt pressured, she said. If I'd ever been promised anything. And I asked. She looked down at her hands. I told them the truth. That word again. Truth. It had a way of showing up late, but it always insisted on being heard. They reassigned my department, she continued. Different leadership. Different reporting line. She paused. No guarantees. There never are, I said. She studied my face like she was searching for anger she expected to find. Maybe hoped to find. You're not celebrating. This isn't a victory lap, I replied. It's an inventory. She exhaled slowly. I didn't mean for it to become that. I know, I said. And I did. Intent doesn't stop impact. It just explains how you got there. Later that evening, she poured herself a glass of wine and didn't offer me one. That, more than anything, told me where we stood. Independence had returned. Not intimacy, just space. I don't know what happens to us now, she said. That I considered the question carefully. Not as a husband. as a man who'd finally stopped pretending not to notice patterns. That depends, I said, on whether we're willing to live in the same reality. She nodded once. No promises, no drama, just acknowledgement. Over the weekend, messages trickled in. People who'd been polite before were suddenly warm. Invitations to coffee. Vague comments about integrity and timing. The ecosystem had adjusted. It always does that on Sunday night. Laura packed a small bag. I'm staying with my sister for a bit, she said. That sounds wise. I replied that I'd the door. She hesitated. You didn't destroy him, she said quietly. He did that himself. I know, I said. I just stopped holding the mirror. She left. The door closed. The house exhaled that on Monday morning. I woke up early, made coffee, and read the news like any other day. Somewhere downtown, an office was quieter than it used to be. Somewhere else, a career was being redefined without shortcuts. As for me, I went on with my life. Not lighter, not heavier, just a line. If this story made you think about power, silence, or the cost of letting jokes pass unchecked, subscribe, hit like, and leave a comment. Stories like this don't end at galas. They begin when someone finally speaks.